The evening air grew cold as shadows lengthened across Westside Park. Marcus Johnson sat on his usual bench, his weathered hands carefully organizing the few possessions that remained of his former life. To anyone passing by, he appeared to be just another homeless man, another unfortunate soul lost in the cracks of society. What the world didn't know was that Marcus Johnson had spent 20 years as one of the CIA's most effective covert operatives. His hands, now seemingly frail, had once dismantled terrorist cells across 3 continents. His eyes, which now gazed distantly at playing children, had once tracked high-value targets through crowded marketplaces in Damascus and Kabul. Evening, Mr. Marcus called Mrs. Santiago, who walked her terrier through the park each day at dusk. She was one of the few who bothered to acknowledge him. Marcus nodded politely. He appreciated these small moments of human connection. They anchored him to a world he had nearly abandoned after his last mission went catastrophically wrong. 3 agents dead. A school caught in crossfire. The nightmares still came, which was why Marcus often chose to stay awake through the night, watching over the park like an unseen guardian. "They're back again," whispered Darnell, another homeless man who had taken to sleeping near Marcus for protection, over by the east entrance. Marcus turned his gaze slowly toward the park's east gate. 5 young men entered, their shaved heads and matching jackets making them instantly recognizable. The Pure Legion had been terrorizing the city's minority communities for months. Their symbol, a white fist clenched around 3 lightning bolts, was spray-painted across buildings in neighborhoods where police response was notoriously slow. "Maybe you should move on tonight," Marcus told Darnell quietly. "Go to the shelter on 4th Street. They're full up. Besides, those boys ain't bothered us before." Marcus knew better. He had watched the gang's patterns. They were expanding their territory, growing bolder. Just last week, they had beaten an elderly Korean shopkeeper unconscious. The week before, they had firebombed a mosque. No arrests had been made. As darkness settled across the park, Marcus observed the gang members drinking, laughing, taking turns, striking a tree with baseball bats. They were working themselves up for something. Their voices grew louder, their movements more aggressive. Other park regulars slipped away quietly, sensing the danger. "You should go," Marcus repeated to Darnell, but the younger man had fallen asleep against a nearby tree. The Pure Legion members began moving through the park, flashlights sweeping across bushes where homeless people sometimes slept. They found an old man named Wilkins first, kicking over his shopping cart, laughing as his few possessions scattered across the grass. Marcus sat very still. A part of him, the part he had tried to bury along with his past, began to stir. His breathing slowed, his senses sharpened. He became aware of each gang member's position, noting their builds, identifying which ones carried concealed weapons by the way they moved. "Hey, we got another one over here," shouted one of the men, his flashlight finding Darnell. Marcus stood up silently. He had chosen this life of anonymity, had promised himself never to return to violence. But as the gang surrounded the sleeping Darnell, Marcus remembered another promise he had made long ago, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Pure Legion hadn't noticed Marcus yet. They were unaware that the homeless black man watching from the shadows wasn't just another victim. They had no idea they were about to provoke someone trained to be a ghost, a man who had once been called the CIA's most lethal asset. And that was the last mistake they would make tonight. "Wake up, trash!" The boot connected with Darnell's ribs, jolting him awake with a pained cry. 5 members of the Pure Legion surrounded him, their faces twisted with cruel smiles in the dim park light. Marcus moved silently across the grass, keeping to the shadows. 20 years of training had taught him patience. Timing was everything. "Please," Darnell begged, curling into himself. "I don't want trouble." The tallest one, a muscular man with a lightning bolt tattooed on his neck, laughed. "Should thought about that before you decided to sleep in our park." "Your park?" A calm voice cut through the night. The gang members turned, surprised to see Marcus standing just outside their circle. In the faint light, they saw only what they wanted to see, an older black man in worn clothes, another easy target. "Well, look what we have here," said the tattooed leader, turning away from Darnell. "2 for 1 special tonight, boys." Marcus stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. "You should leave now," he said quietly. The gang erupted in laughter. One of them, a skinny man with a shaved head, pulled out a knife. The blade caught the moonlight as he pointed it at Marcus. "You're giving us orders." The skinny man stepped forward. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I do," Marcus replied. "You don't." Something in his voice, the absolute certainty, made the leader pause for just a moment, but pride pushed him forward. "Teach this old man some respect," he ordered the others. The first attacker lunged with the knife. For the onlookers, Darnell and the other gang members, what happened next seemed impossible. The knife never reached its target. Instead, Marcus's hand moved in a blur, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting. The sound of breaking bone was followed by a scream as the knife fell to the grass. The second attacker swung a baseball bat at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked with fluid grace, grabbed the bat mid-swing, and used the man's momentum to send him crashing into two of his friends. 3 bodies hit the ground hard. "What the?" The leader didn't finish his sentence. Marcus moved toward him with terrifying speed, every motion efficient and precise. 2 strikes, 1 to the throat, 1 to the knee, and the tattooed man collapsed, gasping for air. The 5th gang member pulled a gun from his waistband. Marcus's expression didn't change. He moved like water, sliding past the gun's aim. His elbow connected with the gunman's temple. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the sky before falling beside its unconscious owner. 20 seconds, that's all it had taken. "Oh my God," Darnell whispered, still curled on the ground. "Who are you?" Marcus didn't answer. He calmly collected the weapons, the knife, the gun, and 2 hidden knives he'd spotted during the brief conflict. With practiced movements, he disassembled the gun, pocketing the firing pin and tossing the rest into a nearby trash can. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone had heard the gunshot. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked Darnell, helping him to his feet. "Yeah, I think so," Darnell replied, staring at the groaning gang members scattered around them. "You didn't kill them." "Those days are behind me," Marcus said simply. The tattooed leader, still conscious but unable to stand, looked up at Marcus with hate-filled eyes. "You're dead," he wheezed. "When my people find out..." Marcus knelt beside him. "Tell your people exactly what happened here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell them to stay away from this park and the people in it." As blue lights flashed at the park entrance, Marcus helped Darnell gather his things. "We need to go," he said. "The police will have questions I don't want to answer." They vanished into the darkness just as the first officers entered the park, leaving behind 5 battered racists and a mystery that would soon spread through the city like wildfire. Detective Sarah Chen crouched beside the park bench, examining the scuff marks on the grass. 3 days had passed since the incident, but she could still piece together what had happened. 20 years in law enforcement had taught her to read violence like a book. "To let me get this straight," she said to Officer Rodriguez, who stood nearby. 5 members of Pure Legion, all with military-style combat training, got taken down by a homeless man. Rodriguez nodded. "That's what the witnesses say. Happened in less than a minute." Jen stood up, her eyes scanning the park. Something about this case didn't add up. The attack pattern described by witnesses wasn't street fighting. It was tactical, precise, the kind only taught to special forces or intelligence operatives. "Any ID on this homeless guy?" she asked. "Nothing solid. Park regulars call him Marcus. No last name. Keeps to himself. Been around for about 2 years." Chen's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Victor Crane, the Pure Legion leader with the lightning bolt tattoo, had been released after treatment for a crushed larynx and dislocated knee. His statement claimed they were just talking to some homeless people when they were ambushed. "Bull," Chen muttered, knowing Crane's history of violence. Across town in a dingy apartment building, Victor Crane slammed his fist against the wall, ignoring the pain shooting through his injured knee. "Find him," he shouted at the dozen gang members crowded into the small living room. "I want every corner of this city searched." His second-in-command, a former army dropout named Reeves, stepped forward. "Boss, maybe we should let this one go. The way Tommy describes what happened, this isn't some regular homeless guy." Crane grabbed Reeves by the collar, pulling him close. "You think I care? He humiliated us. If word gets out that Pure Legion got beat by one old black man, we lose everything we built." The others shifted uncomfortably. Their reputation for being untouchable was crumbling. 3 broken arms, 1 concussion, and you, Reeves pointed to Crane's knee brace, barely able to walk. Whoever he is, he's trained. Then we bring more men next time, Crane snarled, and weapons. Meanwhile, Marcus had moved his few possessions to an abandoned maintenance shed near the river. He sat on an overturned bucket, cleaning his glasses with a worn cloth. You saved my life, Darnell said, sitting across from him on an empty crate. Why won't you tell me who you really are? Marcus placed his glasses back on his nose. The less you know, the safer you'll be. Those Pure Legion guys are looking for you everywhere, offering money for information. I know, Marcus replied calmly. It's why you should go to your sisters in Philadelphia like you talked about. Darnell leaned forward. Come with me, you need to get out of town too. I can't leave, Marcus said, his eyes distant. Not yet. Across the city, in a federal building downtown, a secure phone rang in a rarely used office. Director Reynolds, a stern woman in her 60s, answered on the second ring. Confirmation came in, said the voice on the other end. Facial recognition is 92% matched to Johnson. Reynolds closed her eyes briefly. Marcus Johnson had been one of her best operatives before the incident in Beirut broke him. She'd helped him disappear, understanding his need to vanish after what he'd seen, what he'd done. Has he hurt anyone? She asked. No fatalities, just some injured gang members who were attacking homeless people. Reynolds sighed. Keep monitoring, but don't approach. If it is him, and he feels cornered. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The agent on the other end understood. Back at the police station, Detective Chen pinned photos of the injured gang members to her board. Next to them, she placed a sketch of the mysterious homeless man based on witness descriptions. Who are you really, Marcus? She whispered to the sketch. And what am I supposed to do with you? She had no idea she was about to find herself caught between a vicious gang seeking revenge, a damaged ex-operative, and a government agency desperate to keep its secrets buried. Rain pounded the city streets as Marcus moved through the shadows between buildings. He had sensed them an hour ago. 2 men in plain clothes with government-issue sidearms, trying too hard to look casual. Agency men. After all these years, they had found him. He slipped into an abandoned warehouse, climbing to the second floor for a better view of the street. Through a broken window, he watched them scanning the area, communicating through discreet earpieces. Should have moved on, he whispered to himself. The incident with Pure Legion had created too much noise. Now the ghosts of his past had come calling. 3 blocks away, Detective Chen sat in her unmarked police car, reviewing the file she had compiled on Marcus Johnson. There wasn't much. No criminal record, no social security matches, no driver's license. It was as if he didn't exist before appearing in Westside Park 2 years ago. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed her captain's number. Chen, she answered. Drop the Pure Legion case, Captain Rivera said without greeting. Chen straightened in her seat. Sir? Just got a call from federal agents. They're taking over. On what grounds? Chen demanded. This is a local gang assault case. Not anymore. His voice lowered. Listen, Sarah, these guys were serious. Homeland Security level serious. Whatever you stumbled into, it's bigger than some homeless man defending himself. Chen hung up, her mind racing. Federal agents didn't take interest in street fights unless something much larger was at stake, or someone. Back at the warehouse, Marcus sensed another presence. He turned quickly, muscles tensing for combat. Hello, Marcus, said a woman's voice from the darkness. Marcus relaxed slightly, but kept his guard up. Director Reynolds. Didn't expect you to come personally. Reynolds stepped forward, her gray hair illuminated by the faint light from the window. She looked older than when he'd last seen her, the lines around her eyes deeper. 15 years of hiding, and you blow your cover taking down some street thugs, she said, shaking her head. Getting sentimental in your retirement. They were hurting innocent people. Reynolds sighed. The Marcus I knew could walk past a massacre if the mission required it. That Marcus died in Beirut, he replied coldly. They stood in silence for a moment, years of complicated history hanging between them. Pure Legion isn't just some local hate group, Reynolds finally said. They're connected to a domestic terror network we've been tracking. Your Little Park incident put their leadership on alert. Marcus watched her carefully. Not my problem anymore. It is when they're hunting you. Reynolds handed him a phone. They put a bounty on your head. 20,000 for information, 50,000 for delivery. The phone showed an image of his face, grainy but recognizable, with the offer details below. I can handle some racist thugs, Marcus said, handing the phone back. Maybe, but can the people around you? Reynolds let the question hang in the air. That younger homeless man you saved, Darnell, they're watching his known contacts. The park vendor who gives you coffee sometimes? They visited her yesterday. Marcus felt a cold anger building inside him. What do you want from me, Director? Come back in. Let us protect you. To a safe house, or back to work? Marcus asked, his voice hard. Reynolds didn't answer directly. The agency can make the Pure Legion problem disappear, permanently. Before Marcus could respond, the warehouse door crashed open below. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Police. Detective Chen, Metro PD. Reynolds melted into the shadows with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades in the field. Think about my offer, Marcus, her voice whispered. Some wars you can't fight alone. As Chen's footsteps approached the stairs, Marcus faced a choice. Run again, as he had been doing for years, or stand and face a detective who was getting too close to secrets that could get her killed. For the first time in a long time, Marcus didn't immediately choose to disappear. Marcus stood perfectly still as Detective Chen reached the top of the warehouse stairs, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a moment, their eyes met across the empty space. Mr. Johnson, Chen said calmly, keeping her hand near her holster but not drawing her weapon. I've been looking for you. I know. Marcus's voice was steady. The question is why? Chen took a cautious step forward. 5 members of Pure Legion in the hospital. Fighting techniques that match Special Forces training. A man with no records existing before 2 years ago. She paused. I'm a detective. I detect. Marcus remained silent, calculating his options. The window behind him offered an escape route. He could disappear again, find another city, another park bench, another anonymous existence. I'm not here to arrest you, Chen continued. If I wanted to do that, I would have brought backup. What do you want, detective? Chen holstered her weapon completely, a gesture of trust. Information. Pure Legion isn't just attacking random homeless people anymore. They're organizing. 3 firebombings in minority neighborhoods this month, 2 attempted murders. They're escalating, and we can't stop them. That sounds like a police problem, Marcus replied. It would be, if they didn't have protection. Chen's expression hardened. Someone with connections is keeping their leaders out of jail. Every time we build a case, witnesses disappear or evidence gets compromised. Outside, rain continued to pour. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Why come to me? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Because you're not what you appear to be, Chen said simply. And because you've already shown you can handle them. Marcus turned to look out the broken window. Across the street, he spotted one of Reynolds' agents watching the warehouse. The agency was giving him space to make his choice, but they were still there, waiting. Pure Legion put a bounty on your head, Chen added. $50,000. They're hunting you, and they won't stop until they find you. I can take care of myself. I believe that, Chen nodded. But what about Darnell? Mrs. Santiago who gives you coffee. The kids who play basketball near your bench? Pure Legion doesn't just target their enemies. They target anyone their enemies care about. The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had spent years avoiding connections, trying not to care. But somehow, without realizing it, he had built a small community of people who mattered to him. What exactly are you proposing, detective? He asked finally. Chen stepped closer. Work with me. Not officially, nothing on record. Help me understand how Pure Legion operates, where they're vulnerable. Help me build a case that will stick. And in return, a new identity, legitimate this time, with documents that will hold up to scrutiny, an apartment, a chance to stop running. Marcus knew there had to be more. Who authorized this offer? My captain doesn't know I'm here, Chen admitted. This is just me, trying to do the right thing. Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of deception. He found none. Just determination and a genuine desire for justice. The warehouse fell silent except for the rain hitting the roof. Marcus thought about Director Reynolds' offer to come back to the agency to return to the shadows. He thought about running again, starting over in another anonymous corner of another city. Then he thought about Darnell, about Mrs. Santiago, about the children in the park who might become Pure Legion's next victims. "I have conditions," Marcus said finally. Chen's expression relaxed slightly. "Name them." "I work alone. I don't carry weapons. And when this is done, I disappear. Completely. No one follows me, not the police, not the feds." Chen extended her hand. "Deal." As Marcus shook her hand, he knew he had just made his most dangerous decision since leaving the agency. He was stepping back into a world he had sworn to leave behind. But this time, it would be on his terms. The abandoned apartment building offered a perfect view of Pure Legion's main gathering spot, a rundown auto shop that served as their headquarters. Marcus sat motionless near the window, using a pair of binoculars borrowed from Detective Chen. For 3 nights, he had watched their patterns, counting members, noting vehicles, mapping their security routines. Tonight would be the first move in his carefully constructed plan. "See anything new?" Chen asked, handing him a cup of coffee as she joined him at the window. 3 new arrivals today, out-of-state plates. They're bringing in reinforcements." Marcus took a sip of the coffee, "and they've doubled the guards at the back entrance." "They're nervous," Chen observed. "Good." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but there was a cold determination in his eyes. Fear makes people careless. Across town, Victor Crane paced the floor of the auto shop office, his injured knee still forcing him to use a cane. Maps of the city covered the walls, with red circles marking known homeless encampments and shelters. "Nothing?" He barked into his phone. "It's been a week." The voice on the other end stammered excuses about how their target had seemingly vanished. "Find him," Crane shouted, ending the call. He turned to Reeves, who sat cleaning a handgun. "We look weak. The soldiers of Purity in Baltimore are asking questions. Our suppliers are getting nervous." "Maybe we should focus on our business instead of hunting one homeless guy," Reeves suggested carefully. Crane slammed his cane against the desk. "He humiliated us. No one does that to Pure Legion." As darkness fell, Marcus moved silently from his observation post. He wore dark clothing provided by Chen, nothing tactical, just ordinary clothes that wouldn't draw attention. In his pocket was a small digital camera and a USB drive. "Remember, no confrontation," Chen had instructed earlier. "We need evidence, not bodies." "I don't do that anymore," Marcus had replied quietly. Now, as he approached the auto shop from the blind spot he had identified, Marcus focused on his breathing. Slow and steady, the same techniques that had once helped him eliminate targets now kept him centered on a different mission. The security camera on the back wall had a 3-second gap in its rotation, a flaw he had noticed on the first night. Marcus timed his movement perfectly, slipping into the shadow of a dumpster just as the camera swung away. From there, he could see through a grimy window into the shop's main area. Inside, crates were being unloaded from a van. Marcus raised the camera, zooming in on the contents as the crates were opened. Weapons. Military-grade rifles with serial numbers being filed off by Legion members. He documented everything: faces, weapons, the money changing hands. When one member opened a laptop to check something, Marcus photographed the screen, capturing account numbers and contacts. This wasn't just a local hate group. The evidence confirmed what Reynolds had suggested. Pure Legion was connected to a larger network. After gathering what he needed, Marcus retreated as silently as he had come. Across the street from the police station the next morning, Marcus handed Chen a sealed envelope. "Everything you need to connect them to illegal weapons trafficking," he said. "Bank accounts, supplier names, delivery schedules for the next shipment." Chen looked surprised. "How did you get all this in one night?" "I was thorough." Marcus didn't elaborate. "This is enough for a warrant," Chen said, clearly impressed. "There's more." Marcus handed her a second envelope. "They're planning something at the community center on 3rd Street. Some kind of attack during the cultural festival this weekend. You'll find details of their planning meeting tonight at this address." Chen studied his face. "You're not just gathering evidence, are you? You're systematically taking them apart." For the first time since they'd started working together, Marcus showed a hint of a smile. In my former profession, detective, I learned that direct confrontation is rarely the most effective strategy. Pure Legion expects violence. They don't expect their secrets to be exposed, their plans anticipated, their organization dismantled piece by piece. Chen nodded slowly. Psychological warfare. I prefer to call it methodical justice, Marcus replied, turning to leave. I'll contact you tomorrow with more information. As he walked away, Marcus knew the real battle was just beginning. Pure Legion would soon discover they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, and one who knew exactly where to strike. Victor Crane stared at the television in disbelief as news footage showed police raiding 3 Pure Legion safe houses simultaneously. 17 members arrested. Weapons confiscated. Bank accounts frozen. How? He screamed, hurling his empty whiskey glass against the wall. How do they know everything? The auto shop, once bustling with Legion activity, now stood nearly empty. Only Reeves and 4 of their most loyal members remained, nervously checking windows and clutching weapons. We've got a rat, Reeves said, his face tense. Someone's feeding information to the cops. Crane shook his head. No, this is him, the homeless man. He limped to the wall covered with maps and tore them down. 3 weeks of our people getting arrested, suppliers cutting ties, members disappearing. Boss, we need to leave town, Reeves urged. The Baltimore crew will take us in until this blows over. Crane's eyes had a dangerous, wild look. No, I'm not running. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through recent messages. I know how to draw them out. Across town, Marcus sat in Detective Chen's office, reviewing files on a laptop. 29 arrests, Chen said proudly. The DA says it's the biggest organized crime takedown in the city this year. Marcus nodded but didn't share her enthusiasm. Crane is still free. As long as he's out there, this isn't over. We got warrants for his arrest. Every officer in the city is looking for him. He's desperate now, Marcus warned. That makes him unpredictable. Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. As she read it, her expression changed to concern. What is it? Marcus asked. There's a situation at the homeless shelter on Pine Street. Armed men have taken hostages. Marcus was on his feet instantly. Crane. How can you be sure? Because that's where Darnell has been staying. They arrived near the shelter to find police barricades already in place. SWAT team members positioned themselves around the building while negotiators tried to establish contact with the hostage takers. Captain Rivera approached Chen. What are you doing here? And who is this? He's a consultant, Chen said quickly. What's the situation? 5 armed men inside. At least 20 hostages, mostly shelter residents and 2 staff members. Rivera looked grim. They're demanding to talk to the homeless man who attacked Pure Legion. They've given us 1 hour before they start shooting hostages. Marcus stepped forward. Let me go in. Absolutely not, Rivera said firmly. Captain, Chen intervened. This is what they want. They're after him. Then we definitely don't give them what they want, Rivera argued. Marcus spoke quietly. They won't hurt the hostages if they have me. That's not their goal. You don't know that, Rivera countered. I do. Marcus's voice was calm but left no room for argument. I dealt with men like Crane before. This is personal. He wants to prove he's not weak. While they argued, Marcus studied the building. 3 entrances, windows on all sides. He had already formulated 3 different entry strategies before the captain finished his next sentence. Even if I wanted to let you in, which I don't, it would violate every hostage negotiation protocol we have, Rivera said. Marcus turned to Chen. You promised me autonomy. This is where I need it. Chen looked torn between her duty as a police officer and her agreement with Marcus. Before she could respond, Marcus's phone rang. The number was unknown. Put it on speaker, Chen instructed. Marcus answered, Yes. Is this the man who thinks he can destroy Pure Legion? Crane's voice was strained, unhinged. This is Marcus Johnson. A pause. The famous Marcus Johnson, not so homeless anymore, are you? Working with the cops now? Let the hostages go, Crane. This is between you and me. Crane laughed bitterly. You have 15 minutes to come inside alone. For every minute you're late, I shoot someone, starting with your friend Darnell." The call ended. Captain Rivera immediately began organizing SWAT for an assault plan, but Marcus had already made his decision. "I'm going in," he stated simply. Chen grabbed his arm. "Marcus, he'll kill you." For the first time since they'd met, Marcus smiled genuinely. "You can try." As Marcus walked toward the shelter, removing his jacket to show he was unarmed, he felt a familiar calm settle over him, the kind that had served him through countless missions. He wasn't a CIA operative anymore, but some skills never disappeared, and Victor Crane was about to learn why Marcus Johnson had once been the agency's most feared asset. Marcus walked through the shelter door with his hands raised, stepping into the dim light of the main room. Hostages sat huddled against the wall, fear etched on their faces. Darnell was tied to a chair in the center, his eyes swollen shut from a recent beating. The man of the hour arrives, Crane sneered, his injured leg still forcing him to lean on a cane. "Alone and unarmed, just as I demanded." "Let them go," Marcus said calmly, his eyes scanning the room, calculating distances, noting the nervous trigger fingers of Crane's men. "You have me now." Crane laughed. "You destroyed everything I built. Years of work, gone in weeks." He pressed the gun harder against Darnell's head. "Why would I let anyone go?" "Because you're not a complete fool," Marcus replied, taking a slow step forward. "The building is surrounded. The only way you leave here alive is by releasing the hostages." Reeves, standing near the window, shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, maybe we should." "Shut up," Crane shouted. "Nobody's going anywhere until I get what I came for." Marcus took another step. "And what's that?" "Revenge." Crane's eyes burned with hatred. "I want you to beg. I want everyone to see the great Marcus Johnson on his knees before me." Outside, Detective Chen watched through binoculars as SWAT positioned snipers on adjacent rooftops. "Any clear shots?" she asked the team leader. "Negative. Too many bodies in the way." Inside, Marcus slowly knelt, his hands still raised. "Is this what you wanted, Crane? Does this make you feel powerful?" Crane smiled, but something in Marcus's calm demeanor unsettled him. A man facing death shouldn't be so composed. "Search him," Crane ordered one of his men. The Legion member approached cautiously, patting Marcus down. "He's clean." "Now let the hostages go," Marcus said. "You have your moment. Don't waste it." Crane hesitated, then nodded to Reeves. "Take the women and children out. Keep the men." As Reeves began directing some hostages toward the door, Marcus locked eyes with Darnell, giving him a nearly imperceptible nod. "You know, Crane," Marcus said conversationally, still on his knees, "in my former life I studied men like you, men who mistake cruelty for strength." Crane's smile faded. "Former life? I was given many names during my career. The Ghost was my favorite." Marcus spoke clearly, making sure every Legion member could hear him. 20 years with the Central Intelligence Agency, specializing in dismantling terrorist organizations. The room grew tense as understanding dawned on the remaining Legion members. They weren't facing a homeless man. They were facing something much more dangerous. "You're lying," Crane said, but doubt had crept into his voice. "The CIA teaches a technique," Marcus continued calmly. "How to dislocate your own thumb to escape restraints." In one fluid motion, Marcus brought his supposedly empty hands forward. Something metallic glinted between his fingers, a small piece of wire he'd hidden in his sleeve before entering. What happened next occurred so quickly that the Legion members barely had time to react. Marcus threw the wire with precision, striking the overhead sprinkler system. Water cascaded down, momentarily disorienting everyone. By the time Crane blinked water from his eyes, Marcus was no longer kneeling. The Legion member nearest to him was already unconscious. The second went down before he could raise his weapon. Outside, Chen heard shots. "Move in," she ordered, leading the SWAT team through the doors. They found Crane on the floor, his own gun now pressed against his forehead. Marcus stood over him, perfectly composed despite the sprinklers soaking his clothes. "He's all yours, Detective," Marcus said, stepping away as officers swarmed in. 3 days later, Marcus sat on a bench in the courthouse park. Watching children play, Chen approached, carrying 2 coffee cups. Crane and his entire leadership will be imprisoned for decades, she said, handing him a cup. The Pure Legion is finished. Marcus nodded. And my new identity. Chen handed him an envelope. As promised, apartment keys, social security card, driver's license, a fresh start. Thank you. What will you do now? She asked. Marcus watched a young boy help a smaller child who had fallen. I was thinking about counseling, he said. Working with veterans, maybe. People who've seen too much violence. Chen smiled. Using your experience for something good. Redemption is a long path, Marcus replied, sipping his coffee, but it has to start somewhere. As they sat in comfortable silence, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of belonging, of purpose beyond survival. The ghosts of his past would always be with him, but perhaps now they could finally guide him toward healing rather than hiding. For the man who had once been called the Ghost, it was time to step into the light.